It started like any other sunny weekend. I was out on the lake, enjoying a quiet afternoon on my boat. The water was calm, the breeze was perfect, and everything felt right. Until I got back to shore, that's when I saw the notice. The HOA had slapped a violation on my dock, claiming I was breaking some obscure rule buried deep in their handbook. I tried to reason with them, but one woman, let's call her Karen, wasn't having it. She was the self-appointed enforcer of every petty regulation, and for some reason, she had it out for me from day one. A week later, my boat mysteriously sank overnight. No storm, no accident, just gone. When I confronted the HOA, Karen smugly told me I should have followed the rules. That's when I realized this wasn't just about the boat, it was about control. But what she didn't know was, I had the means to fight back. And not with angry emails or pointless meetings. I bought the lake. That's right. I bought the land the lake sits on, and suddenly the HOA didn't have as much power as they thought. But I wasn't done yet, because once I found out what that clubhouse really meant to them, well, let's just say things got interesting. Stick around, because you won't believe what happened next. Now, I know buying a lake sounds extreme, but you have to understand what I was dealing with. This wasn't just a normal HOA. These folks treated the neighborhood like their personal kingdom, and Karen was the queen. Ever since I moved in, she'd been watching me like a hawk. Complaints about my mailbox color, my trash cans being out an hour too early, even my lawn chairs being too modern. I tried to laugh it off at first, thinking maybe she'd get bored. But nope, it only got worse. The lake was the centerpiece of the neighborhood. Everyone used it. Barbecues, paddleboarding, fishing, you name it. But the HOA never actually owned the lake. The land around it had gone up for private sale years ago, and no one noticed except me. After the boat incident, I started digging. That's when I realized, if I bought that land, I'd legally control access to the lake. So I did. The clubhouse sat right on the lake's edge. That building meant everything to the HOA. It's where they held all their meetings, parties, and events. It was their pride and joy. But the thing is, it was also partially built on the land I now owned. I didn't say anything at first. I wanted to see what they'd do. And trust me, they didn't disappoint. It didn't take long for the HOA to realize something was off. First, I put up small private property signs along the trail leading to the lake. Nothing aggressive, just enough to make them nervous. Within days, I started getting emails from the board asking if the signs were a mistake. I didn't respond. Then came the emergency meeting, which of course was held in the beloved clubhouse. That's when Karen made her move. She showed up at my door with a forced smile and a thick folder of paperwork. She claimed that HOA had rights to the land through some kind of shared easement agreement. But when I asked to see the documents, she fumbled. It was all bluff, typical Karen style. That's when I knew I had them exactly where I wanted. Meanwhile, I started hearing whispers from other neighbors. Turns out, I wasn't the only one Karen had been bothering. There was the retired vet who got fined for building a small shed. The single mom who got a violation for her kid's bike being left in the driveway. Quietly, people started backing me, asking what was really going on with the lake and if I had a plan. The pressure was building, and I could tell the board was starting to crack. But they still had one last card to play, one I didn't see coming. Just when I thought I had the upper hand, things took a turn. I got a certified letter in the mail. It was from the HOA's lawyer. They were threatening legal action, claiming I was interfering with community access and creating a hostile environment. Karen had clearly rallied the board to try and scare me into backing down. They even started spreading rumors around the neighborhood, saying I was planning to shut down the lake permanently and charge people to use it. None of it was true, but fear travels fast. Suddenly, neighbors who had once supported me were backing off. I'd walk my dog and get cold stares, awkward silence. It felt like Karen was winning again, but I wasn't about to let that happen. I doubled down and hired my own attorney, someone sharp who actually understood land use laws. What we uncovered only made things worse for the HOA. That clubhouse, it didn't just sit on land I owned. Parts of it violated zoning codes. There were permits missing. It had been built on shaky legal ground the entire time. But instead of backing off, the HOA went into full panic mode. They called an emergency vote to try and buy back the lake access at a laughably low price. And when I declined, that's when the real fireworks began. But instead of backing off, the HOA went into full panic mode. They called an emergency vote to try and buy back the lake access at a laughably low price. And when I declined, that's when the real fireworks began. One final meeting, packed with angry neighbors, desperate board members, and Karen, front and center, ready for a fight. The clubhouse meeting was standing room only. I walked in and you could feel the tension thick in the air. Karen was already at the front, pacing like she was prepping for a courtroom battle. As soon as she saw me, she smirked, like she thought she had something big planned. And she did. That's when the second twist hit me. Right there in front of everyone, she announced they'd filed a petition with the city to have my property rights reviewed, claiming I'd obtained the land through shady tactics, and that it was a danger to the community. She even brought in a city inspector, someone she clearly had a connection with, who started listing off supposed infractions and violations tied to the land. Most of it was nonsense, but the room went quiet. People were clearly shaken. I was too, for a second. But here's where it got really wild. As the inspector kept talking, one of the older residents stood up. Mr. Dalton, a quiet guy who'd lived there since the neighborhood was built. He cut the inspector off and dropped a bombshell. He was the original developer. And he had records, real, legal documents, that proved the HOA had no rights to any part of the lake or the clubhouse shoreline. Karen went pale. The room exploded with questions and shouting. But me? I just stood there watching her carefully because I knew this was only the beginning. The room went dead silent as Mr. Dalton laid out the original land surveys and development records. Turns out, decades ago, the lake and surrounding property were never officially handed over to the HOA. They had just assumed control over time, and no one questioned it until now. Karen tried to brush it off, saying the documents were outdated, but the city inspector quickly changed his tone once he saw the signatures and county seals. You could see the panic start to set in. That was the breaking point. The neighbors, tired of Karen's control and the HOA's fear tactics, started turning on the board. People demanded transparency, called for a full audit, and even shouted for Karen to resign on the spot. It was chaos, but for once, not aimed at me. I kept my cool, let it all play out, and when the dust settled, I quietly handed the city inspector my attorney's certified letter confirming ownership and zoning violations on the clubhouse structure. A month later, demolition signs went up. But here's the twist. Just before the clubhouse came down, I got a call from a developer. Turns out, the lakefront land I bought was more valuable than I thought. He offered me a deal to turn part of it into a public park with a private dock, just for me. So yeah, Karen sank my boat, but I ended up with the whole shoreline. The clubhouse came down quietly one morning, with only a few people watching from a distance. Karen had resigned from the HOA a week before, and no one really said goodbye. The board got reshuffled, neighbors started talking again, and the whole place just felt lighter. The developer and I worked out a deal. Part of the lake would stay open to the public as a small park, while I kept my own little private dock on the far side. Funny how things turned out. What started as a sunken boat became something so much bigger. I didn't plan on owning the lake or changing the neighborhood, but sometimes standing up for yourself leads to unexpected wins. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: don't let entitled people like Karen walk all over you. Stay. But here's the twist. Just before the clubhouse came down, I got a call from a developer. Turns out, the lakefront land I bought was more valuable than I thought. He offered me a deal to turn part of it into a public park with a private dock, just for me. So yeah, Karen sank my boat, but I ended up with the whole shoreline. The clubhouse came down quietly one morning, with only a few people watching from a distance. Karen had resigned from the HOA the week before, and no one really said goodbye. The board got reshuffled, neighbors started talking again, and the whole place just felt lighter. The developer and I worked out a deal. Part of the lake would stay open to the public as a small park, while I kept my own little private dock on the far side. Funny how things turned out. What started as a sunken boat became something so much bigger. I didn't plan on owning the lake or changing the neighborhood, but sometimes standing up for yourself leads to unexpected wins. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: don't let entitled people like Karen walk all over you. Stay calm, get the facts, and play the long game. Because sometimes the best revenge is just owning the lake.